It's Wednesday, right? Wednesday.
Yep.
I'm used to doing this on Saturday. I was going to say Saturday. Wait a minute. Wednesday, January 6th, 2021. Welcome, Ernesto. Good evening.
Good evening, Paul. How are you doing?
Good. Except good. I just got something in my eye, so you're going to have to excuse me.
Day.
Oh, yes. Today.
Interesting day. I was going to ask you, in the Catholic world, the 6th, well, not too much in Bolivia, but in
King's
Spain,
Day.
It's King's Day, and it's a very important day in some Catholic countries, especially in Spain, not so much here in Bolivia. In the States, it's not really relevant, is it?
I don't think so. I didn't really know anything about it until I got here.
Yeah.
So,
so it is not relevant, yeah. But
yeah, there's probably people who recognize or celebrated it, Catholics anyway. In general, no, it's not that big a deal. Here it's a big deal in my household because my wife's last name is Reyes, and so.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah. So they celebrate on both accounts.
Yeah.
As Christians, and because it's a family affair. Great.
Yeah. So I guess it's maybe not for the right reasons, but yeah, here we are. And so well, we've got a few interesting topics we can touch on today. That's for sure. We were talking about before we started recording. I guess the most immediate one for us here in Bolivia is COVID. You know, it was nice to get off that subject for a while. But we have seen there's definitely what you would call, I guess, a second wave here. And, you know, they're not flare-ups. Flare-ups are, I guess, when the numbers spike and then go back down. But we're consistently hitting over 1,000 cases a day. I think we're getting closer to 1,500, 1,600, and half of those being here in Santa Cruz. And it's obviously a concern. Although if you look at the attitude or the behavior of the general population, people are going about business as normal. Very interesting. And I think in terms of, you know, if you want to analyze something, it's interesting to look at about 6 months ago when we were at the crest of the first wave, when we were hitting numbers between 1,000 up to 2,000 cases a day between I think I said basically between July and August, and we go look at now and the numbers are about the same. Under Añez, there were strict lockdowns at some point, and I think it came down to an economic decision. She kind of left it up and also because the numbers weren't the same in each city or in each department, she basically passed off the responsibility to local governments, whether it were municipal or departmental, which I guess makes sense because, you know, if the numbers aren't the same everywhere at the same time in the severity. But if you look at things now, things have gotten, I don't want to say out of control, but, you know, the numbers are the same. We're in the thousands or 1,500. Here in Santa Cruz, we've got about half those cases. The ICU units are at capacity. You can't get the medications that you need to treat the cases. There's speculation with the prices going through the roof on the medications if you can find them. And if you look at the way it's playing out, at least with the national or the central government, they're keeping real quiet. And they're not really saying much of anything. And I don't, if you ask me, most people don't seem to have a problem with that. Nobody's saying, why isn't Arce doing anything? Why isn't the Ministerio de Salud, you know, doing something?
There are no complaints, right? Not really vociferous complaints. You know, nobody's screaming in the Facebook, on Twitter, nowhere, you know, I don't see that at all.
Somebody made an interesting point. You don't have to just talk about the MAS. Carlos Mesa, you know, Carlos Mesa has been probably the most, on a national level anyway, the most vociferous proponent or actor of the opposition. And he's nowhere to be seen on the topic.
Yeah. Well, Mrs. Añez, she's speaking against the government.
Well, she's doing it because the government loved to say, oh, when Añez was in power, she wasn't doing anything, or like let's specifically when we talk about the vaccinations, right? The vaccines.
Uh-huh.
They say, we don't have vaccine, people are starting to say, when are the vaccines going to get here? Because in all the other countries, or not all the other countries, but many countries are starting to vaccinate, and they've already got the deal set up to get, to ship vaccines in. And the current administration loves to point fingers at Añez and say, well, she didn't do anything, and she didn't, or her administration didn't do anything to what's the word, to get negotiations underway to bring in vaccines, which apparently isn't true. I think she's in. Oh, and by the way, they also say, look what was happening months ago, and people were dying, and the ICU units were full, and this and that, and Añez was totally incompetent in handling the pandemic. Probably confident because we had months, and I've talked about this before, July, August, September, October, November, where the numbers never went over 150, basically. They were usually between, like, let's say 30 and 90 on a daily basis, which is very manageable and acceptable by anybody's terms on a national level for a country of this size. And I think the current administration was counting on those numbers remaining stable,
right.
And so I think Añez is coming out now and saying, see,
right. She's making that an issue, right? Because she said when they left government, there were 50 cases in a day. And now I think, I don't know what the numbers are today, but they're in the hundreds, right? Like in
somewhere in the 1700 we're in the thousands. We're pushing 2000.
Right. Yeah, you're right. So that's what she's doing. She's basically doing that. And another thing that she's doing is she's talking about the vaccinations and the money issue. The government yesterday or today, I think, explained that they're not going to show the contracts because they have a clause of confidentiality. Which I think is really ridiculous, because that's confidentiality is relevant for a country when you're speaking about things that involve national security.
National security, right?
If you buy airplanes in order to bomb Chile, then there's a clause of confidentiality because you don't want them to know what you're buying, right? If you're going to shoot them, So basically, that's what involves a clause of confidentiality. But not if you're going to vaccinate people. If you're going to vaccinate people, the first thing we need to know is how much did that cost, especially because there is a history of corruption whenever somebody buys anything that is relevant, has a relationship with COVID, not only in Bolivia, anywhere in the world. This is the gold mine, for people that administer governments. This is exactly where there's corruption and people make a lot of money. So I think that this government, well, Masistas are smart in that, because it shows in everything they do. They have learned how to govern, and there's really not only an art, there's a craft about governing, and these people have been 14, 15 years in government, so they have the answers outright, and the answer to this problem was, let's make a confidentiality clause so nobody speaks about this, and right now it'll be difficult for the opposition, especially because the opposition is not doing anything about it, because really the opposition should be attacking those contracts and that clause of confidentiality in terms of its constitutionality,
Yeah, I saw somebody bring that up today in one of the headlines, either today or yesterday. Somebody, I can't remember who, some opposition politician saying exactly that. It's unconstitutional, and there was a public headline that says this confidentiality is illegal, basically.
Right, it's illegal, right? Absolutely, It's not. It doesn't have a good reason in order for it to be confidential, and it should be an issue of the opposition. It should be an issue in Congress and in the Assembly. They should call people like the Minister of Health and have him explain why it's confidential. And if it's reasonable, then it's okay. If it's not reasonable, then they have to open up the contracts, and we have to see how much they costed, because that's a relevant issue. But I hope they have learned, because if they haven't learned, this is going to be another disaster in terms of corruption, But well, we expect that they have learned from Añez's government that one or two purchases of COVID stuff can make a government go down the hill. So that's exactly what happened with Mrs. Añez, and well, let's see what this guy does now.
You'd think they'd choose things that were a little that would call us attention. When you're dealing with COVID, the first thing you think of when you think of, let's say 6 months ago, the first thing you think of in terms of medical supply purchases, again, 6 months ago, was the ventilators, right? So you'd think that's like the one thing you wouldn't want to fudge the numbers on to try to make a buck, right? And that's exactly. And now with the vaccine, now like if you ask somebody about COVID, like what's the first thing that comes to mind in terms of fighting or combating COVID? People are gonna, 9 out of 10 people are gonna say vaccines. So you think that's the last thing you'd want to try to, you know, do dirty dealings with? I don't know. Like if they want to do it, maybe with like the little plastic tube that connects this to that, instead of buying it for 10 cents, buy it for $1.50, right? Because nobody's going to pay attention. But with the vaccines, come on, you got to be smarter than that.
Exactly. And they have no better idea than to put a clause of confidentiality, which I think is stupid, because one, I don't think that you can really, well, it's not that I don't think they cannot do it. I think that one, it's unwise to do corruption with the vaccines. Two, I think that governments are buying the vaccines directly from the producers. Mm-hmm. It's not like the respiradores that they bought it from intermediaries.
A middleman, yeah.
So I think these are just direct buys from the producer, from Sputnik or whatever, you know. So I think that when you buy from the producer, there's a much smaller chance that there will be corruption with the producer, because the producer is going to sell the product at the price that it sells everybody else. I would guess so, you know. But let's see what happens, because I think it was very stupid to have a confidentiality clause. All it does is make suspicions go to 100 level. Everybody wants to see the contract now. So
and just to clarify the numbers, before this came up about the confidentiality clause, I saw this in the news that they were buying, that the Bolivian government was buying this about 5.2 million vaccines doses. It was $9.50 or $9.75 per dose.
Right.
Where the average for all the competitors, for Moderna and Pfizer, the AstraZeneca and all those, the average is between $2 and $3. And so, yeah. and I've seen that number come up again today when something I saw in the news. So that number's coming from somewhere, right? I don't. Right. And if there's a confidentiality clause, it makes a lot of sense if they're spending 3 to 4 times as much on a vaccine that hasn't even received any kind of international certification, and there's all this controversy around how transparent the whatever company in Russia, I don't have a name for it, I know it's called Sputnik 5, but I don't know the name of the company that's producing it, isn't willing to release test results for the efficacy and for the side effects, et cetera, et cetera.
See, very interesting. The numbers that you're bringing up are very interesting, because I haven't seen that on the press. I don't know if you've seen that.
I've seen it twice. Before I knew about the confidentiality clause, and I saw it again today. It's somewhere just shy of $10 a dose.
But have you seen a discussion in among the politicians or in the media about the difference of prices, or not? Or have you seen isolated that the price of the vaccine from Sputnik and the price of Pfizer, for example?
I can't give you a clear answer, a straight answer on that. I don't remember, but I know I saw this before, before any news came up about this confidentiality clause, that the Bolivian government was spending close to $10 per dose.
Right. This is going to be an issue then. It's going to be a political issue. It has to be. If the price difference is so big, there's no way it cannot be a political issue.
And by the way, and I'm not an expert on this, but you've heard about this, the COVAX, right?
Yeah.
The COVAX, which is basically some like a convenio or something, basically that assures that countries that don't have the money, the means to vaccinate in mass with really, when you need to do it, with things like polio and measles and things like the main vaccines, that these countries will be supplied with vaccines free of charge. So wherever that money comes from, Bolivia shouldn't. Bolivia applies for the COVAX program, so we should be getting vaccines free of charge. Now, if the government, my assumption is that the Arce administration is looking to buy vaccines sooner than later, because with the COVAX program, probably it takes longer to access them, right? But again, that doesn't answer the question of why are they willing to spend 3 or 4 times more. Maybe it's, you know, about the problem with the, how do you say, the cadena de frío? I don't remember how to say that in English, but this apparently the Sputnik vaccine doesn't need any refrigeration, or if it does, it's like minimal, nothing out of this, you know, you can stick it in your refrigerator or something like that. Whereas all these other vaccines need between -20 and -70 degrees. And maybe it comes down to
the hardest one to handle, I think, is Pfizer, because Moderna is not as hard.
I think one is -70 and one is -20, but maybe it comes down to that in Bolivia they don't have the infrastructure in place to distribute it and assure that they can maintain those temperatures. Who knows? I don't know. I haven't investigated enough. But I also want to give the benefit of the doubt, or the benefit of the doubt to the government why they would.
You're making, it's an excellent point, the one you're making, because really you need to have that cold chain. I think it's called cold chain. You need to have that in vaccines, because it happened to me like in 1980. I was staying in Cobija for a year, and while I was there, one time I had this small accident. I cut myself with some object that was a metal object.
Something rusty.
The first thing that came to my mind is to get
tetanus shot.
What? Excuse me. What is the name of it?
The tetanus shot.
Tetanus shot. Yeah. So I went to look for the tetanus shot. Well, there weren't too many places in Cobija at that time. Cobija was a small town of like 7,000 people. Oh. And there was only one guy there that had the vaccination, which belonged to the government, and there was no other vaccination. So the day he said, you know, come by tomorrow, and I went there the next day. And he said, okay, bring your arm. So the guy opens this ice box, literally an ice box, a big ice box, you know. But when I looked at that ice box, I was almost sure that whatever he would put into my arm was not really well kept, because it just didn't look serious, you know. It was just an ice box, a big ice box that he probably put it there 5 minutes before I got there, and then he took out the vaccine and put it. The reason I didn't get tetanus then is because I wasn't supposed to get it. You know, that's my whole point. And because it's hard to have a cold chain in Bolivia, especially in the areas, in the warm areas, which is half of Bolivia. Yeah. In Santa Cruz, Beni, and Pando, forget about the whole cold chain. I think that's very hard. You know, you really need refrigeration uninterruptedly. You know. It's not only cold, you need it cold, but uninterruptedly, the same level of temperature all the time. And if you travel, how are you going to take that to Beni or to Pando nowadays? It's very hard, you know. I would imagine nowadays you can take it by air, but still, once you get to Cobija or once you get to Puerto Rico, you have to keep it at that temperature. It's awfully difficult, especially if you have a large number of vaccines, you know. Sure. I don't know. It's going to be a tough issue in Bolivia, and not Latin America, not even in Bolivia, because that's a hard requirement for Amazonic countries, you know, which are very warm in general. Yeah. But let's see what happens.
But if it's a reasonable argument to make, why haven't they said that by now? You know, maybe they don't want to admit it because it doesn't look good to say, oh no, we don't have the cold chain to deal with it. But and the funny thing is, to me, it doesn't seem like a small number, 5.2 million doses in a country of 11 million. That's a huge number. Yeah. And so after the criticism started, why are you spending all this money on this Russian vaccine that hasn't been internationally approved or whatever? And this is a quote from Arce. He says, you know, I'm paraphrasing, oh, well, we're going to buy from the other companies too. But how many other vaccines, if you're already buying 5.5 or 5.2 basically enough doses for half of the whole entire population. How many more are you going to buy?
Yeah. Plus, when you talk about buying, it's the government buying for the people, right? Because the government should let come believe it and sell it, just like any other product in a pharmacy, right? Why do we need the government to buy it? We shouldn't. I mean, the government can buy it and distribute it for free to people. I agree with that, especially in a situation.
Are you asking why aren't they sorry, you cut off at the beginning of the question you were posing for a second. You're asking why can't it be imported privately?
Right, right. And distributed.
When I was having my kid, my older daughter vaccinated, if you go to the posta, your neighborhood, I don't even say post in English, like your neighborhood public clinic, which there's one in every neighborhood, you can go and get the vaccinations for, all the infant things, stuff you're supposed to get your kids vaccinated with before they're 5,
Right.
And there was one point where I had my daughter at the pediatrician's office, and I had the vaccination card, and I said, and he's like, oh, she's missing the vaccination. Oh, well, what's it cost? Oh, you should get it done here right now, no problem. It was like 350 or 370 bolivianos.
Right.
This vaccine. If you go to the posta, it's free. So there's your answer. It probably will be imported by the clínicas privadas, the private hospitals and clinics, but they're also going to charge an arm and a leg for it.
Right.
And how many people have access to that? So that's just
but then again, even in the developed countries, they're having problems in the distribution of the vaccine. In the US, they're having problems. The country that is so far the most successful one in the distribution, I think, is Israel. Israel covered almost 1 million people in a couple of days or few days. Whereas in the States, they're having problems in the distribution depending on the state. It's always difficult to distribute things when you're talking, like you say, about 1 million or 2 million people. It's very hard because you need to get to places. It's not as easy. It's not just come here.
Yeah.
You have to go to Montero, you have to go to Warnes, you have to go to all these little towns and preserve the product at a low temperature, which is the hardest part.
Mm-hmm.
Because you would need a lot of boxes that have that requirement.
Yeah, it goes with dry. I don't know what temperature dry ice is at, but I don't know how they do that. That's an extremely low temperature. So yeah, it's no small feat.
So that's interesting. And one more thing before we change subjects.
Sure.
When you started talking about this issue about the COVID, you touched the issue about how this problem is viewed by different political positions,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to let it go because I think it is a very interesting topic. In the US, it's the right, the political right that says, oh, there's nothing here. You hear Trump, there's nothing to worry about. We should go out and work and open all the shops, and everybody has to make a living because the country has to keep on going on and the economy has to be revived. We cannot let everything die because of COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
The political left in the States is, hey, let's lock down, let's be careful because life is more important than a few bucks in the streets. So we should be careful. In Bolivia, it's exactly the opposite. The left says, hey, we have to go out and work because everybody has the right to make money, and especially the poor people need to make money because they don't have a monthly payment. They have to go and make it a day business with which they survive. So these people have the right to work, and you don't have the right to lock them down in the house because you're expecting these people to live with what? They don't have money,
Mm-hmm.
They cannot survive. So you're asking them to die, not of COVID, but of hunger, So it's interesting to see the different positions. The right in the US is go out and make money because the economy has to survive. And in Bolivia, it's the left that says, hey, go out and make money because you have to survive. You don't have a salary, a monthly salary. You make a day-by-day money, so please go out and do it. And like you say, now the mass is in government. The mass is in government, and the mass is not saying anything about it. You know? It's the policies of the municipalities that are different from the central government. You know, it's the policies of the municipality of Santa Cruz that says, hey, you know, we're going to lock you up again like in the past. But it's not the central government. Definitely, it's not the central government. So yes, it is an interesting contradiction of positions, ideological.
Yeah, and it all comes down to, you know, and I think it comes down to an economic issue. Whereas Añez at the beginning was very easy. I don't want to say easy. Nothing's easy when you're in that position dealing with the pandemic. But I mean, it was much easier, let's say, for her to order a lockdown on the national level at the very beginning, you know, because at the beginning, okay, this is sustainable, let's say, for even though in Bolivia not so much, because people, you know, are living day to day. But it's easy at the beginning to say, oh, we're going to lock down for a month, or we're going to lock down for 2 months. And then when she realized, you know, hey, this isn't sustainable, besides there's certain places on, you know, if you look at a country, it's not, what's the word, homogenic or uniform. Right. In Santa Cruz, you're going to have high numbers, while in another part of the country, you're going to have lower numbers. And so it doesn't make sense to have a national policy when the numbers differ from region to region or city to city or whatever. And at the same time, and now I think I don't know if we were talking about this before we recorded or not, but, you know, she said, well, look at my government. You know, when I left office, the numbers were at 50 cases per day, and now they're at over 1,000.
Right.
And then people say, well, why doesn't Arce lock it, you know, to go back and say national lockdown or whatever? Because he can't. Because even if he wanted to, the economy is not going to take it. People aren't going to take it. You know, we did it for about, it was March, half of March, April, May, and then I think it was around June or July where Añez passed the buck to the local authorities, right? It wasn't a national decision or a central government decision anymore. And I think part of the reason she did that wasn't just because it makes more sense, because it's not, from place to place, the numbers change and the severity changes, but also because it wasn't sustainable. You can't, you know, nobody can handle that. That's why even now, when we have over 1,000 cases or 1,500 cases a day, and everybody has a friend or relatives that's in the ICU unit right now, that the country, or nowhere in Bolivia can handle another lockdown. I'm a firm believer in that. Right. And so while Añez would say, well, why doesn't Mr. Arce do anything? Why do the conservatives? Because in Bolivia, it's the conservatives of the right that is pro lockdown, and you know, why aren't they doing anything? It's because the economic reality is that we can't. And so,
yeah, true. Now, did you look at those people in Quillacollo that went
Jesus, the mask burners?
They burnt the masks.
Yeah,
a liberation message, and they compared themselves to Gandhi. That was, yeah, this is terrible. You know, I just, people are nuts. You know, I thought, when I just read that, I thought it was masistas, you know, but apparently it's a religious group that did that. This is what I read in a newspaper from Cochabamba, that it was a religious group. I don't know what type of religious group, but basically it was, they say that it's a religious group that decided to do that burning of the masks, which is very stupid, I think. But I don't know. I just think that it's ridiculous. But in general, what you said, you know, people here, especially the young people, they don't care about the mask, about distancing, about anything. They just go business as usual, and that's very deplorable, because I think it's basically a message of saying, I don't care about the life of the other people, you know, because young people are not getting it as bad. If they get it, most of the young people are asymptomatic, you know, and so they just don't care about whatever happens to the elder population in this place, you know, or the people that are sick, and that's just awful, you know. I haven't read of a country where this is a crime, but it should be a crime. I know that's probably an extremist position. But if you don't wear a mask and you're attempting against the life of other people, that's a criminal issue. If you have COVID and you start walking around and kissing people around, or kissing, if you're just coughing around, then you are killing somebody. The possibility that you can have somebody contract COVID and die is there. So if you're doing it because you don't care, that should be a crime. But I haven't heard any argument in those terms, not in Bolivia, and I haven't heard argument, I think, in other countries neither. What I have seen here is that I think they are imposing some kind of a sanction, economic sanction, for not wearing a mask.
It's community service or 50 Bolivianos. That's what I've seen.
But I think the thing is more serious than that. I don't know. But again, politicians are not thinking, which is very deplorable, which is bad news. They're not debating things which are very important to debate. I agree. If the conclusion is, no, this cannot be a crime, okay. But after an analysis, after a debate, after we discuss whether this should be or not a crime, in my opinion, and if I was right now a politician, I would really be pressing for this to be a crime. I don't know if it's 10-year prison time, but at least 3 years of prison, I think they should have, because there's in criminal law, there's I handled this better in Spanish, of course, but I'll give you the example. If you grab a car and you accelerate 100 kilometers per hour and you go through a school, that is what they call it's criminal, because you're acting criminally, because you're not caring about the possibility of
the high probability
it is in your mind that you're going through a school. Children are around there, and it's in your mind, if you go at 100 miles per hour, 100 kilometers per hour, that you kill somebody there. And if it happens, it's not just an accident, because the whole legal doctrine says that no, you cannot argue that was an accident, because you knew it was a school, and you cannot go through a school at 100 kilometers per hour because the risk of hitting.
In English, you call it, I guess the term is reckless. It's reckless.
It's reckless.
There's negligence, and then there's reckless. Reckless is.
Yeah, it's more or less that I do it even though I may kill somebody, and I know that I may kill somebody. Reckless, I don't know if reckless.
Pretty sure that's what reckless is. Reckless.
Yeah. Because in Spanish, it comes from dolo. It's dolo and culpa. When you do something with culpa because it was an accidental thing, right? But when you do something dolosamente, it's purposely. You're doing it as you know it's going to happen, or it can happen. And if you know that it can happen and you do it, come on, you're not supposed to do that. It could be reckless. I see it.
I'm pretty sure that's the term. That's at least that's the closest one I can think of.
So this is the analogy that I make with wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. It's the same as the guy that drives his car 100 kilometers per hour in through a school, through a schoolyard. He's going to kill somebody, And if you go without a mask nowadays, anywhere in the world, the possibility that if you're infected, that you're going to infect somebody else is very high, and the possibility that you're going to kill that guy is very high. So you should be liable to go through a suit, a legal suit, a criminal suit, But it hasn't been on the table. It probably will not be on the table. I don't see anybody in that disposition, but I think that it should be. I think
not here.
Not here. Yeah, not here. People are not caring about that. Yeah.
No.
Right. Yep. Not the masistas, not anybody, not the religious people from Quillacollo, not anybody. Yep. Maybe Janine Añez, but it's not sufficient. She doesn't have a majority in Congress. She has nobody in Congress now. So I'm in the losing end of the argument here. That was COVID and the vaccinations, right?
Yeah, that last point is interesting about that. There's no ideological consistency in terms of whether you're on the left or the right politically. How, at least on the level of the authorities, how you're handling the pandemic. It flip-flops. Mexico, if we go from north to south, The United States, you have a leader who's on the right, or a president on the right, who says, "Oh, nothing to see here, no big deal." Mexico, same position on COVID, but he's
left.
definitely on the left. If you go down to Panama, Panama is definitely handling it like a leftist country, but I would say that their Nito Cortizo is probably more on the right. You get to Bolivia, we had a righty in government for a while using COVID policies, which you would think, in terms of protecting human life and more compassionate, I'm more identified with the left. And then you get a lefty in office and he's hands off. It's there's no consistency. It's really interesting topic to analyze. But and I guess what it comes down to is the economic reality in each country.
Yeah, I think that's the issue.
Yeah, I think so. Moving along, do you want to talk about the postponement elections, or do you want to talk about? Yeah,
so maybe, and then we talk about the analogy.
Just to put people up to speed here, we do have you can't call them midterm elections here because it's not the middle of it's local or municipal and departmental elections that are supposed to happen in March. Is that correct? March?
That's right.
And so there's people talking about whether they should be postponed or not, because at least here in Santa Cruz, they're talking that the crest of this second wave is going to be in February. That's their estimation, and that maybe it would be better to put off the elections. I know the former, not the term they use for him now in the newspapers is the former minister Ortiz, is the first person to, I think, formally present some kind of proposal to postpone the elections for 60 days or something like that. But I don't know. I personally don't see it being a major issue because, and I don't think anybody cares, because there's not the same urgency and the fatigue that there was with the interim government. It's not the central government this time. And we aren't coming out of a major political crisis where nobody, it's not the same. We're not in the same situation. And so if people want to, postpone elections for mayor and for governor for 2 months, then so be it. I don't see it being an issue. What's your take?
Okay. First, I think it's important because you did mention it's in March. Yes, it is in March, the elections, but the election are supposed to be on the 7th of March, which is almost exactly 2 months from today, which is very close. And that's nothing in time, that's nothing in time. So the perspective of the COVID in 2 months, just without any scientific knowledge, it just doesn't look like it's going to be better or much better in 2 months. In fact, it could be much worse in 2 months. We don't know that, but it doesn't look like it's going to be much better, because not even the vaccinations are going to be here. The earliest the vaccines will be in Bolivia is in March, I think. So until the elections, we won't have any vaccinations, and the curve is probably not going to flatten until then, because that's too soon. But and so as we get closer to the 7th of March, probably in 2 or 3 weeks from today, I think this debate is going to take body. It's going to become important, because it's going to be a political issue. Sooner or later, it's going to become a political issue, because I don't think everybody will be in agreement of saying, oh, we don't really give a damn, be it whenever. Right now, it's like that. And I agree with you. At this point, nobody is really discussing the pertinence of prolonging or not the term of office of the present authorities. That's not being a discussion yet, but I think it'll become an issue in 2 or 3 weeks, because this is definitely a political issue. So if, for example, the Masistas, I don't know what the position of the Masistas will be, but my take is that since they don't really care about the dangers because this has been their position
since the beginning, basically.
Since the beginning, then they'll say, why postpone it? It should be on the 7th. And I guarantee you that the political right is going to be against that, because they say, oh, these guys want to kill the voters because they want to take over, and because just remember, in Santa Cruz, the Masistas are not at the municipality. They are not at the gobernación. It's both of those authorities are from the political right. In La Paz, they don't have the municipality. That's in the hands of the opposition. And they don't have the Alcaldía del Alto, So the only thing they have in La Paz is, oh no, they don't even have the gobernación in La Paz. So basically, they don't have, and the two big departments of Bolivia, they're not in power, locally speaking. So I think that they will find, if the MAS goes with the discourse of, oh, we should just have the elections on the 7th, I think that the opposition is going to go and say, oh, these guys are against life. They don't care about it. They just want to oust the present authorities because they are eager to get into local governments and steal the money or whatever. I think that we'll see that in a couple of weeks. I think a few weeks that this will become an issue. Let's see what the electoral court does, because they cannot alone postpone the election. I think that has to be through a vote.
Approved in the Asamblea.
In the Asamblea, yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, we'll see that. Yeah, and it's going to get to the Asamblea, I think, sooner or later. Probably sooner than later. I would imagine that in 2 weeks we'll be burning. Let's see what happens. That's my take on this issue, that it will become a political issue, especially if the MAS is in the position of, let's keep the 7th as the date,
You want my honest, I mean, my feeling is that the MAS is gonna win on that one. And again, we talked about this before. People, despite the numbers being as high as they are, the population at large is not taking care. Nobody seems, people are living their lives.
Yep.
Most people are wearing masks and spraying alcohol in their hands every 10 seconds and this and that, but they're going out to eat, they're going to the supermarket, they're going out shopping, they're at the mall, they're at Starbucks, they're at the markets. Nobody is taking, I'd say nobody's taking the real precautions to not get infected. And when I say real precautions, I mean staying home as much as possible. And then you also put the precedent of the elections back in October, when people were saying, oh, we're going to have elections and there's going to be a huge spike in the COVID cases. Did that happen? Nope, it did not.
Nope.
And so I can see that, I agree with in the sense that there will be opposition candidates or opposition parties or actors, whatever you want to call them, that are going to say, yeah, this is a atentado contra la salud or whatever, but nobody's gonna pay any attention to them. even if they're gonna vote for those candidates or for those parties or agrupaciones or whatever.
But look at the humankind is just the same, I was watching this afternoon TV in the States. That demonstration in Congress was exactly like a Masista demonstration. Because those guys were not wearing masks, the majority of them. They were not keeping their distance from each other. They were, everybody was, again, body against body, just right there. And it's surprising, because one would imagine that in the States that wouldn't happen, because the level of education is higher. The death rate is very high in the States. People are dying by the thousands, literally,
Every day.
So yeah, every day. So you would think that people will be much more conscious. They are not, and the same is happening in Bolivia. I agree with you. Here, same thing, people are dying, not as many as they were dying in July, but they're still dying. People are getting affected every day. But it seems that people are more in control, but they're not more in control. They feel they're more in control because they spray alcohol on their hands every 2 minutes, but that's not being under control. But it's a feeling that people have, It's a feeling that they have the necessity to go out and do business as usual. And they're doing business as usual. Yeah, you're right on that. I think let's see what happens in the debate. But my feeling is that there will be a debate, because this is an issue to debate. But yeah, you may be right. I agree with you. I think that there will be a debate, But in the end, the debate will be in favor of the Masista position, because the Masistas will say, you know, let's hear the people, and there will be people, there will be some polls, and the polls will probably show that, you know, let's just have the elections on the 7th. Yeah, I agree with you on that point. But it's an interesting issue that, anyhow, how people view this. But the postponement, it probably will go that way. I haven't heard the electoral tribunal say anything about this issue, but they're not alarmed by the whole situation. It doesn't seem like.
No. You just touched on the last topic we had on the agenda, which was drawing certain parallels and contrast, perhaps, between what happened today in the United States in the Capitol building and what's happened here in the past, right? It's definitely been a great opportunity for the people who like to post memes and those kinds of things on Facebook. But there's and again, it also shows that there's not a consistency between action or policy or behavior and political ideology.
Right.
Like, you know, I mean, you've got the people on, I don't know where to start with this, because you look at it and there's so much that reminds me. We've talked about this before with Evo Morales and Donald Trump and how they're on opposite ends of the political spectrum, but there's personalities and their styles of leadership are so similar. And even like the way they speak in their, there's a lot of similarities there. And then you look at, if you want to call them Masistas or Evo supporters, and you look at the Trumpers or the people who support Trump, they couldn't be more different, right? And but they act the same, you know. I mean, in terms of blindly following their leader, and but then you get into again, it's hard to like structure this in a coherent way, but there's so many things that are happening right now or have happened during the Trump administration that have culminated today that remind me of recent happenings here. You know, people breaking in and I don't know, invading or trespassing in the Capitol building, and then you think back to Camacho going into the government palace with the Bible, and but again, they're on opposite sides. Trump was the one who lost, and they're saying, no, he didn't. He won. They go, you know, Trump will say that they stole the election from us, and then you have this people invading the building, the Capitol building, and on our end of things in Bolivia, Evo won in a allegedly fraudulent election, and it was the opposition, if you want to put them all in the same basket, on the right, at least the leaders of the opposition, Camacho is definitely far right, going into the government palace after Evo had fled the country. So it's like, you know, there's parallels of similarities, and there's contrasts, and it's also fascinating, and I don't feel good about it in any way. It's sad to see what's going on in the States, what's happened today, especially, and that you can, you know, if you look at the United States right now, it looks just like any other third world country with an unstable democracy. So I hate to laugh after I say that, but whoever would have thought that we'd be seeing what we're seeing right now?
No, nobody would have. I would have never imagined to see the scenes that we looked at on the TV screens today. It was just unimaginable. I would have never thought about this to happen in my lifetime, because I tend to think that I know politics in the States, and it just didn't seem predictable at all. This would happen. But you know, there's something that I would like to point out, and it's what I'm going to say is difficult to understand, not only Americans that could hear us, but even Bolivians. You know, Bolivians that don't live in Santa Cruz. It's hard for them to understand that. I don't know if it's hard, but it's easier for us that we live in Santa Cruz.
Okay.
Today I was listening Fox News, and I listened especially to one guy that spoke there, and he was just so clear in his words and so clear in his thoughts that it's very hard to reproduce his argument. But basically, it's this, the guy that was speaking was a Latin American. He's a Latin guy in the state, but he's a Republican, and he put it so clearly. He said, "Well, he said this is basically ethnic politics or racial politics." He said, it's so sad to see blah blah blah, whatever we said before, but basically he says it's the Trumpists, not the Republicans. It's the Trumpists, that see that a group of people that had always had power in the U.S. are losing power now. And of course, that's racial. It's who's losing power. It's the West are losing power in the States. Who is gaining power? It's blacks and Latinos and Asians,
minorities,
and minorities, right? So this is exactly what I see in Santa Cruz. It's almost it's the same thing, except that most people in the world understand what happens in the U.S. because everybody looks at the U.S., but nobody knows what's Santa Cruz, especially because very few people would imagine that there would be a place so radically to the right, so radically racist as Santa Cruz. I don't think Latin Americans wouldn't imagine that because it's not imaginable. If you go to Lima or you go to Santiago or you go to Buenos Aires, you don't see a place like that because there aren't too many places. There probably are places like that in Latin America, but not too many of those places. Latin America in general terms is much more heterogeneous,
in a sentence, you don't see anywhere else in Latin America where there's so much white pride.
Right. You don't because
it's not funny. I guess it's ironic.
Because it's the only place. Well, in Bolivia, the rule is that the majority is indigenous, and the majority have ruled in Bolivia for many years. Probably not formally, but since there is democracy, the majorities are indigenous people, and they vote and they decide whatever government is in place. So if you look at Latin American history, I lived in Lima from 1980. I went to Lima in 1984 until 1982 until 85. And those 3 years that I was there, I could watch something that was very interesting. In Bolivia, the echelons of the governing people were basically mestizos, but very dark mestizos. The governing echelon of people in Peru were whiter. Yeah. Because don't forget that Peru was part of the aristocracy, the Spanish aristocracy was located in Spain, but it was located also in Mexico City, and it was located in Lima, and afterward in Buenos Aires, right? Because those were the viceroy places. So it was very interesting in the 80s to compare that. Since I was originally a political scientist, I like to compare that. And whenever I lived in Lima, I used to look at the governing people, not only the ministers and the president. Congress was comprised basically of white people, but not as racist as in Santa Cruz. In Santa Cruz, it's just the extreme, and it's incredible how the white supremacists in Santa Cruz are so worried about losing power, just like the Trumpists, and they behave just like the Trumpists. They don't care about democracy, they don't care about votes, they don't care anything. They just want the grip on power on their territorial bases. In the U.S., it's the whole country. In Santa Cruz, they just don't admit that they could lose power here. And the elections of the 7th of April of March in Santa Cruz are exactly that. It's just the challenge. It's the first serious challenge in Santa Cruz history. It would be the first time that either the municipality or the gobernación will go in the hands of the non-white people.
Party.
Yeah, definitely. We understand what that means. That means basically it doesn't matter the political party. It's the people that emerge from the Comité Cívico, which is really the KKK of Santa Cruz, and basically the what they call here the logias, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, those people are the ones that always govern.
The logias are like the super elitist untouchables, you could say, I guess.
Right. So this is the importance of the 7th of March elections in Santa Cruz. They're going to be historical, especially if the MAS wins whichever one of them. If the MAS wins the municipality, or if the MAS wins the gobernación, it'll be very interesting, because you will see the fall of the Trumpists in Bolivia. But it's interesting to see, though, the comparison of Santa Cruz and the Trumpists is the behavior is pretty much the same. But yes, away from Santa Cruz, the behavior of the Trumpists and the Evo people is very similar. The patterns are the same, basically because they don't believe in democracy. They're not tied to democracy. They're tied with power. They want to govern. They want to govern at whatever cost. And the leitmotif of their movements is racial. In both cases.
Yes.
Because throughout today's program, we spoke about the ideology of them as being on the left. That is true, but that's a half true, because the basis, the political basis of the Masistas are the cocaleros, and the cocaleros are definitely not leftists. They're capitalists to the extreme. Yeah. So, but basically, the ideology of the Mas is very ethnic. It's very racial. And the ideology of the Trumpists is very racial. It's very.
What I said to somebody today on Facebook was that if Trump and Evo both spoke the same language, they'd be best friends.
Yeah.
But you could never get a group of Trumpists and a group of Evistas into a room at a party together. They wouldn't mix well.
Oh no. Yeah. But in terms of political behavior, they're pretty similar. Yeah, they're pretty similar. But it's basically because they're racist, both are racist, They both are the extremes of, one is the extreme of the white racism, and the other ones are the extreme of like the Malcolm X people, these are racist, indigenous people are racist, and it's terrible. I don't know, in 1980, I took a course on Marxism at Drew University. And my professor was a really well-versed Marxist, not Marxist in the sense of politically being pro-Marx. He was a studious of the Marxist phenomenon. He had written books about Marx and in his works, and he understood Marxism like few people that I know until today. He was just a brilliant man, and I enjoyed so much his classes that I took a couple of them with him. And I recall until like it was so vividly, like it was yesterday, on the last day of the course was called Marx and Marxism, he asked us, what we thought about Marx and Marxism. And he asked many of the students there what we thought about it. And when he asked me, he got really pissed off because he asked me what I thought about it. And I said, well, basically, I told him I don't think that the problem is what Marx poses as a problem, which is the struggle between the haves and the have-nots, the struggle between the proletariat and the rich people. I said the bourgeoisie, it's basically the struggle. I don't think that's the history of mankind, I told him. I think that it's a struggle between races, and he got pissed off at me, I think, forever. He changed. His face was changed absolutely. He was Jewish. Oh, by the way, yeah, he was Jewish. His last name was Reamer. His name was Neil Reamer, and he was I enjoyed his class, and he enjoyed me a lot. I think it was reciprocal, but he never thought that I would say that, and it's just like I would have said it yesterday. I still remember his reaction, and you have to agree with him because. He was an older man at the time, I don't know what his age was, maybe 70s, and this is 1980. So for him, the reminiscence of the Second World War, and for him, the reminiscence of Hitlerism and Nazism and the situation of the Jewish people in Europe was probably recent for him, and his family probably lived that, So when I put forth a guy from the third world that comes from Bolivia and says, I think that the struggle in the world is not between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, but between races. he felt very bad when I said that. He jumped like Trump would jump, or like Evo would. He said, no, 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 no. That's not true. But we're seeing it today. We're seeing it today. It's an awful thing to speak about, because it's almost unspeakable. When you think the world in terms of race, it's something that it's so hard to analyze because it's not rational. People that resort to the rational argument, to the race argument, they're not thinking, because it's a reaction. It's whether you're white or you're black or you're indigenous. You're not being rational on the argumentation. You're just being emotional. It's just, I am better than you because I am black, and the whole humanity was born in Africa, and I have to be right about my arguments. And if you go to the indigenous people in Latin America or in Bolivia, especially, the argument, there's no argument. They're better because they were here before everybody else came, and they have the patrimony of the truth. And nobility is with them, and that's just terrible. That's when arguments end being the important and relevant thing in politics. And I think that's why Neil Raymer was pissed off at me at that time, because when you talk about race, you're not talking about rationale. And I think he was correct in that sense, but he was not correct in the sense that today is 40 years after that date, and we're still in that.
Right, you look at
a lot of racism in the world, and there's a lot of race politics going on in the world, more than in the 1980s. I think much more than the 80s.
It's a super. It's sad, and it's an interesting point. You look at Trump and Evo, and the leaders, CB Coast here in Santa Cruz, and they're masters at pulling those strings and in knowing where to. Exactly. I have to agree with you, but I'm sad that I have to agree with you. It's
No, it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing to discuss. But then again, if we don't discuss that we're alcoholics because we drink every day, we're never
in denial.
We're get over it. We're never going to get over it. So, in that sense, it's healthy to discuss it, but it's abhorring. I don't like to discuss it because I feel what I said. There are no arguments to this. It's just so stupid. But then again, we are in 2021, and we're speaking about race politics more than ever before in our lives.
Sad. But I'm glad we can end this on a positive note. Yeah. But I think that's a strong point to end the program on today. Mm-hmm. And it is what it is.
It is what it is. It's good to talk about it, and we have to get over it as a humanity. As humanity, as human beings, because we can't get swallowed by this hatred, and all you're seeing in the U.S. is hatred, and all you're seeing in Bolivia is hatred, and that's no good.
No,
because we have to get over this. When I lived in the States in the 70s and early 80s, life was different. The Americans had just gotten over the civil rights uprisings of the 60s, and during the 70s, everything seemed to be going better. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden you get to, I don't know when, and all of it wasn't good, because it didn't work. Whatever happened in the 60s wasn't good enough. And here we are. Yep.
Here we are.
Oh, yeah,
all right.
We should keep on going. Well, it was marvelous. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody who's listening and watching, and we'll see you next week.
Okay. Have a good week.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.